Chapter 14. The Prisoner. When I had returned to the house of Careness, I passed the heavy bolted door which led to the hallway, off which was the luxurious cell in which Careness was accustomed to keep his special captures, which cell had been shown to me earlier by Ho-Tu. I was surprised to see that now 4 guards were posted at this door. When I returned to our compartment, I found Elizabeth sleeping on a mat wrapped in a rep-cloth blanket under the slave ring. The cloth and chain had been snapped around her throat, for it is a rule that in the house of Careness that all slaves, save those who may be on house business, be secured by the 18th bar. This precaution is implemented by guards who make the round shortly before the bar. When I was in the compartment, however, as I normally was at this time, she would not be secured, my presence being taken as sufficient guarantee of her custody. On such nights we would double-beam the door and sleep in one another's arms. I entered the compartment, closed the door, and put the beams in place. Elizabeth, with a rustle of chain, sat up, rubbing her eyes. She was attired in a brief gown of red pleasure silk, prescribed for her because she was a red silk girl and in training. Virginia and Phyllis, in their cells, would wear similar gowns, but of white silk. Elizabeth's collar had also been changed. She now wore a red enamelled collar. Virginia and Phyllis, however, Elizabeth had told me, still wore the simple iron collars which had been hammered around their necks by the smith days before. I turned up the lamp and noted that the floor of the compartment had been washed down with sponge and towel, that the chests and cabinets had been dusted and straightened, that cleaned furs lay neatly folded on the stone couch. I had insisted that the girl keep the compartment spotless. I think it was not so much I minded an occasional bit of silk lying on the floor, as that I derived great pleasure from the fact that the lovely Miss Elizabeth Cardwell, slave in the house of Careness, must keep my quarters. Elizabeth's puttering about, dusting a cloth round her hair, serving me with these small domesticities, was a sight I relished. She had had the temerity to suggest that such chores should be shared, but when threatened with a thong and slave ring, she had irritably understood that she must conform to my wishes. Interestingly, one evening, after learning that she would be forced to do these things, and alone, she had been unusually submissive, responsive, passionate. Women, I suspected, even proud, beautiful, intelligent women like Elizabeth Cardwell, secretly wish their men to be strong, and upon occasion to prove it to them, commanding them as mere females, giving them no choice but to do precisely as he wishes. I released Elizabeth from the slave ring, the chain, and the collar. She sniffed suspiciously. "You have been at the baths again," she said. "It's true," I said. "The pool of blue flowers?" she asked. Yes," I said. "Are the girls pretty there?" she asked. "Not so pretty as you," I said. "You are a sweet beast," she said, and she looked up at me. "You will take me to the pool of blue flowers, will you not?" "Well, there are many lovely pools in the Carpathian," I said. "Oh, but you will take me to the pool of blue flowers, won't you?" she asked. "Perhaps," I said. "You beast," she said, and she smiled, kissing me. And then she knelt down on the mat, and I sat across from her, cross-legged. "While you were sporting about in the pool of blue flowers," she said, "I was spoken to by Careness." I was immediately attentive. To this point the tall, angular dour scribe had given us no information. "He tells me," she said, "that he has at last bribed a chamber slave in the compartment of Careness to allow him access to the compartments at given times. The records you seek are not, of course, kept in the office of Careness." "Well, that would be extremely dangerous," I said.
"He says he may need time," she said. "He has found numerous notes and maps, but it may take months to copy them. He doesn't wish to appear to be absent from his duties for long periods."
"Well, are the maps clear?" I asked. "Are the notes in Korean?"
"He says they are."
"That's interesting," I said. I didn't mention it to Elizabeth, but I would have expected the maps to be oriented only by key, and the notes to have been in some form of code.
"Our problem," said Elizabeth, "will be to get the copies to the Sada."
"Oh, that shouldn't be difficult," I said, "for I have free exit from the house, and you, when you are working with Careness after your training, may upon occasion leave."
"I didn't realize the matter would be so easy," she said.
"Nor did I said. The reason that Elizabeth and I had been placed in the house of Careness had been because Careness, according to report, couldn't obtain the documents we believed must exist in the house. It was thought that I, as a mercenary in the house, or Elizabeth, as a staff slave, might be able to locate and seize the documents in question. This was prior to the death of the warrior of Thentis who resembled me, which had given me independent reason for coming to R, and in the guise of an assassin. "Still," I said, "it seems a very long time to wait. Months."
"Yeah," she said, "it does."
"In that time," I said, "the others might carry their work far, establishing new bases of influence, new stations, storehouses perhaps for arms." And she nodded. "The best we can do," I said, "is to convey the materials which Careness copies in portions to the Sada. As he finishes a fair portion, we must arrange for it to be transmitted. I've much freedom. I can arrange for the older Tal to be summoned from Koribar, and to act as our messenger between R and the mountains of the Priest King. He is already known to Al-Kar, who brought you to the house of Clark in Thentis."
"Unfortunately," said Elizabeth, "Careness has said he will not turn over any materials to us until he is finished."
"Why is that?" I asked, angry.
"He fears there might be discovery in sending them from the house. Also, he fears there may be spies of others in the Sada itself, who, if they found out about the information being sent from the house of Careness, would investigate and doubtless find us."
"Yes, well, I think that's not a likely possibility," I said.
"But Careness believes so," she said.
I shrugged. "It seems we must do what Careness wishes."
"We have no other choice," she said.
"When the information is complete," I said, "I gather that we three will depart for the Sada." She laughed.
"Careness will certainly not wish to be left behind. Indeed, I am sure he will carry the documents on his very person."
I smiled. "I suppose Careness is wise to trust no one."
"He is playing a dangerous game, Tal."
I nodded.
"So," she said, "we must wait."
"Also," I said, "I would like to find out who slew the warrior from Thentis, he who died on the high bridge in Koribar near the Cylinder of Warriors."
"You did not even know him," she said.
And then, as I gazed sternly upon her, she dropped her eyes.
"I'm sorry," she said. She looked up. "It is only that I fear for you."
I took her hands gently in mine. "I know," I said.
"Tonight," she said, "hold me. I'm frightened."
I took her gently in my arms and kissed her, and she put her head against my left shoulder. About the third bar, unable to sleep, I left the side of Elizabeth and drew on my tunic, that of the assassin. My mind was concerned with the appearance of Marlenus in R. I knew the former Ubar, still to his followers, years after the days of his glory, the Ubar of Ubars, was not in R for the sport of the races. Also in the baths, Sheila, who doubtless heard much in the Carpathian, had been evasive about matters pertaining to the Ubar. This suggested to me that there might be movements afoot in R of which I knew nothing. I hadn't known, for example, about the many sorties to the Voltae to find and slay Marlenus, sorties which had invariably failed, and, I gather, was not common knowledge. I gathered that those now high in R had good reason for such desperate attempts to locate and slay the former Ubar. I left the compartment and walked the halls of the house of Careness, lost in thought. I passed occasional guards in the corridors, but none challenged me. I had, for most practical purposes, the freedom of the house. I was angry and frustrated that Careness wouldn't surrender the results of his labours before their completion, but I could understand his reasoning, his fears. And, on the other hand, the fact that he had himself located the documents we wished, and was copying them, gave me great satisfaction, for it meant that the work of Elizabeth and I in the house would now be little other than to convey Careness and his documents to the Sardar some months from now. I anticipated little difficulty in this portion of the business. I could buy a tarn with carrying basket easily, and in 5 days, with Careness and Elizabeth, we would be on the Black Sardar, safe with Misk, Kusk, Alkar, Bartar, and my other friends. I puzzled on the fact that the maps and documents which Careness was copying were not coded, but in simple Gorian. I suppose that it was thought by others that the materials were safe in the keeping of Careness. Once, as I walked round, I heard a wild cry, a howling roar of an animal, apparently large and fierce. I supposed it to be the beast which Ho-Tu and the others seemed so frightened of. They seemed to know as little of it as I. When I heard the cry, an involuntary shiver coursed down my spine. I felt the hair on my nape and forearms lift and stiffen. I stopped. I heard nothing more, and so I continued to walk about. I didn't fear it, but, like Ho-Tu, I was pleased that it was doubtless safely caged. I wouldn't have cared to meet it in the lonely halls of the house. I found that my steps had inadvertently brought me to the corridor with the heavy bolted door, that door leading to the hallway off which lay the cell for special captures, earlier shown to me by Ho-Tu. The 4 guards were still posted near the door. To my surprise, at the door I encountered none other than Careness, master of the house of Careness. He wore his long black coarse woolen robe, that which bore the 3 stripes of silk, 2 blue enclosing a yellow, on the left sleeve. Around his neck hung the golden medallion of the house of Careness, the tarn with slave chains grasped in its talons. His stone-grey eyes regarded me, but a small smile touched his heavy mouth. "You are up late, killer," he said. "I couldn't sleep." "I thought those of the black caste slept the soundest of all men," said Careness. "Oh, it was something I ate," I said. "Of course," said Careness. "And was your hunt successful?" "Well, I've not yet found the man," I said. "Oh," said Careness. It was bad parga," I said. Careness laughed. "It's just as well you are here. I've something to show you." "What?" I asked. "The downfall of the House of Porters," he said. I knew the House of Porters was the greatest remaining rival to the House of Careness, fighting it for the control of the slave trade in R. Between them they handled better than 70% of the flesh purchased, exchanged, and sold in the city. Several minor houses had shut down. There were others, but small houses, scrabbling for the 30% of the trade still left them. "Follow me," said Careness, leading the way through the door which the guards had thrown open for him. We found ourselves in the hallway, giving access to a large one-way glass backed by metal grillwork. I was not clear as to the meaning of the remark of Careness. Once again I found myself looking through the glass, which on the other side was a mirror, into the luxurious compartment, with wardrobe, chests of silks, rugs and cushions, a silken divan, and a scented sunken bath now drawn. But this time, in that room rich with hangings, with lamps set behind ornate mesh in the ceiling, there was a prisoner. It was a strikingly but cruelly beautiful girl, who walked from one end of the room to the other in fury, like a young caged Sheila. The hood to her ornate, marvellous robes of concealment had been taken from her, and her veil. Otherwise, given the splendour of her robes, she might have been on the highest bridges the envy of all the free women of our. "Behold the downfall of the house of Portus," said Careness. I looked into the room. The girl had black hair, swirling and long, beautiful, which had never been cut, and flashing black eyes, high cheekbones. On each small wrist, locked, she wore a slave bracelet of simple, unadorned steel. The two bracelets were joined by a light, gleaming chain of perhaps a yard in length. It didn't restrict her movements to any appreciable extent. "I want her," said Careness, "to feel steel on her wrists, the weight of a chain." The girl spun around and threw her head back, staring wildly at the ceiling, throwing the chain back over her head. And then she sobbed in rage, and flung the chain forward, striking it on the chests and on the divan again and again. Then, crouching over, with first one hand and then the other, she tried madly to push and slip the encircling, resisting steel over the other hand. She ran even to the bath and took oils, rubbing them on her wrists, but still the steel would not release her. And then she sobbed and ran back to the centre of the room, striking again and again the divan with the chain. Then, still chained, she knelt on the divan, pounding on it with her fists. I heard a movement near us. I turned and saw a female slave in a rep-cloth kitchen tunic stained with food approaching. She was bearing a tray of fruit with a flask of wine, and was followed by a guard. The slave knocked timidly on the door of the cell. The girl sprang from the divan, wiped oil from her wrists on a towel, threw back her hair, and stood regally in the centre of the room. "Enter," she said. The guard unlocked the door, and the kitchen slave deferentially entered, her head down, and placed the tray of fruit and wine on a small low table near the divan. She then, head down, began to back away lightly. "Wait, slave!" ordered the girl. The slave sank to her knees, head down. "Where is your master?" demanded the chained girl.
"I do not know, mistress," said the kitchen slave.
"Who is your master?" demanded the chained girl.
"I am not permitted to say, mistress,"
whined the kitchen slave. The girl in chains strode to her and seized her by the collar, at which point the kitchen slave began to whine and weep, trying to draw back, to turn her head away. The chained girl, half crouching, scrutinized the collar and laughed, and then, with disdain, her hands in the slave's collar, flung her to one side, where the slave lay, fearing to rise. The chained girl kicked her savagely in the side with her slipper. "Begone, slave!" she snarled. And the kitchen slave leapt to her feet and sped through the door, which was closed behind her and locked by the guard. Outside, Careness gestured for the kitchen slave not to leave. Immediately the kitchen slave knelt in the hallway, not speaking, and there were tears in her eyes. Careness then drew my attention again to the interior of the cell. The prisoner now seemed in a better mood. There was a new haughtiness in her movements. She looked down at the tray of fruit and wine and laughed, picked up a fruit and bit into it, smiling. "I have plans for this girl," said Careness, regarding the prisoner through the glass. "I had intended to have her used by a male slave before she leaves the house, but I shall now do so. This afternoon, following her capture, I sent uncollared serving slaves to groom and bathe her.
I observed her, and she interests me. I shall, therefore, before she leaves the home, use her myself. But she will not know who it is with whom she serves, for when I visit her from time to time, she will be locked in a slavehood."
"What do you eventually intend to do with her?" I asked.
"Her hair is very beautiful, is it not?" asked Careness.
"Yes," I said, "it is."
"I expect she's quite vain about it," speculated Careness.
"Oh, doubtless," I said.
"I will have her hair shaved off," said Careness, "and have her bound and hooded and sent by Tarn to another city. Tor, perhaps, where she will be publicly sold."
"Perhaps her sale could be private," I said.
"No," said Careness, "it must be public."
"What has all this to do with the House of Portus?" I asked.
Careness laughed. "You killer would not make a player." I shrugged. "This girl," he said, "will in time make her way back to R. I will arrange it if necessary."
I don't understand," I said.
Careness gestured for the kitchen slave to approach, and she did so immediately. "Look at her collar," said Careness.
I read the collar aloud. "I am the property of the home of Portus."
"She will find her way back to R," said Careness, "and it will be the downfall of the house of Portus."
I looked at him.
"She is, of course," said Careness, "Claudia Tentia in Rabia."